Hey guys, so basically this conversation is inspired by a reading in this book called The Breakbeat Poets, and this book was recommended to me because I'm a rapper. I write rap music and I perform it, and I write poetry as well. I'm a poetry student in my MFA program, and I just... This is a very difficult conversation to have because the obvious larger ways of this topic is within the Black community. Not that there's one Black community, but Black communities. But I'm technically not Black, so I can only talk about my life and my experiences in this way, although I could totally support my friends. But they tell you, tell your story. They tell you, write your story. And so I'm going to write my story and talk about sort of using this video as a response, or sort of a bit of a book review to this collection. Really, the introduction to the collection made me feel extremely excluded. And I'm not okay with that. And I wouldn't be okay with people of color being excluded. I'm absolutely not okay with that. But I'm also not okay with colorless people. Wait, I have some kind of color on my skin. But I'm also not okay with like white people being excluded. I'm not okay with any kind of exclusivity. Now, where this conversation gets scary is where it's kind of like everyone would agree that all lives matter, but for a time, it's important to focus on Black people to really validate that they matter, and to kind of say like they've been neglected for a while and they're not being completely respected, and they haven't been, and so like let's focus on Black lives, and I like that. But I think that where we're going eventually is kind of the all lives matter, and I know the all lives matter hashtag is very offensive, and I understand why. But I'm just saying where we're going eventually is kind of the message. Sorry, I have these hairs that are like tickling me. It's kind of the message that of equality, right? So what I don't want to see happen, and I suppose I'm okay with it happening for a little while, but what generally happens when there's been an imbalance in our society is when we begin to sort of fix that, we oftentimes go to the other extreme. I don't believe we're in danger. Where did my hand go? Sorry, I'm not very tech savvy. There we go. I'm putting this down because I'm like holding it and my hand's like starting to shake. So hopefully you guys can still hear me. If you're watching, feel free to let me know that you can still hear me. Okay, sorry about the technical difficulties. Once I get this set up, I'll be rocking. But this is realism, right? Like, sometimes we don't totally have our shit together and we still like do what we do. Okay, I'm back. I'm set up and I'm ready to rock. So I don't think that we're in danger of like white people being like enslaved or anything crazy to that extreme. But what I've seen happen is back during the time of segregation and back like in the 50s and 60s, very sadly, Black people were not being included in our society, and so what happened was they created their own churches. They had to do that because they weren't being welcomed. They created BET, Black Entertainment Television. They created even things like soul music and in various forms of like jazz. Like these things came out of their culture, and so that makes sense, but now that we're coming to a society of I know we're not there yet. I'm aware of that. But what's happening now is that kind of those clubs and churches and different things are kind of borderline exclusive now to Blacks only, where they were created out of necessity, out of a terrible time. But unfortunately now it's like, sometimes it's like they don't want to let, some of them don't want to let like Black or white people in now. And this is hard because I'm growing up, me and other white writers, are growing up today. And this makes things difficult for us. Okay, I know it's not as difficult for me as it was for, I'm not comparing my struggle, I'm not comparing my story, and I'm not comparing my journey to anyone else's, because I think that it's a wrong and it's a disservice to dismiss or diminish someone else's pain and someone else's experience because there's worse pain and experience. I have a huge problem with that. Like, for instance, someone's like, how was your day? And it was like, oh, like it was really frustrating and got stuck in traffic, and then, like yada, yada, yada. And the other person's like, well, okay, I don't want to find something too offensive, but well, my dog died. That's horrible, but my dog died. So, things can always be worse. And it's like this gross way of like dismissing or diminishing someone's pain because there's other bigger pain. But having a segment of people that have maybe larger pain, I don't even like talking about pain in terms of quantity. I don't like talking about people's experiences in terms of that they need validation. I don't believe that's right. So anyway, I'm going to get into this book. And this is a book, for those of you just now tuning in, it's about hip hop and poetry and how those two kind of collide. And this is a collection of poetry that could also be considered hip hop. And from a craft perspective, it talks about some interesting aspects of the poems.